Alright, so today we're going to show you how to change a turbo on an ISX. It's a little bit of an investigative replacement here because the customer's showing us this oil leaking out of here. Now, we pulled the pipes off before and it's not horribly oily inside of there, but we do think it's pushing a little oil, so we'll go ahead and pull this thing off and switch it out. And while we've got it off, we'll check inside the manifold and look for any bigger leaks or something that might be causing this. There's also some oil back out of this clamp on the back, so we'll pull that pipe off and make sure there's nothing obstructing it. But what will be shown on the video mostly is just the turbo. So we'll start out by taking this charge air pipe off. I use 7/16 there and also here. We'll get that off, and then we'll take this clean air pipe, pull that off, and we'll keep going from there. So follow along, should be a good time. Alright, so pretty slick. Just pulled those pipes off. I just had them off outside the shop, so they were on there, but they weren't super tight, so super easy to pull off. Finally, the air compressor shut off down there, so you can actually hear me. So we'll get this sensor unplugged. We'll nip these wires on the actuator cable, the zip wires, and get it pulled out and unplugged. And then we'll before we get too crazy, we'll probably go down and drain the coolant, because we got some coolant lines that come into this thing. So we'll go to that point and see what happens. Alright, so we're underneath. We're over the pit because it's the only bay we have available, so I just got this clean drum. We'll pull it under here and we'll drain the water. I just take some channel locks or something and bust that loose. Open it up like so. Let her drain in there. Alright, we got the water draining down there. While it's draining, we'll just go ahead and work on some of these zip ties. Without cutting actual wires. Unplug this sensor. Looks like it's been broke before, so someone's got it zip tied on. Like that. And then looks like the same case with this turbo actuator. Just doesn't stay tight, so they've got it zip tied. That was probably too easy, but worked out. This wire here goes down to the little speed sensor in the back here. and usually that's an 8mm hold down bolt. So we'll grab a wrench and weasel around the back. You probably can't even see it in there, but it's a little, I guess you could unplug it here, but where we're going to be switching turbos, as long as the sensor's alright, we'll probably put it back in. So we'll get that unplugged. Once the coolant gets drained, get these coolant lines off, and then we'll honestly be almost there already, down to these hold downs, and they're 15mm. There's 4 of them, and I'll show you, but I usually just get a 15mm end wrench and put another wrench in it as a little cheater to bust them loose. So we'll keep going. Alright, so the water's still draining. I got that little 8mm speed sensor out of the back. One thing we can't forget is these 2 drain bolts. They're 10mm. Once in a while they're a pain, but usually you can get them just with an end wrench or something. So I'll get those pulled, and then we'll start taking everything off the top here. Coolant ought to be done draining by then. So we'll probably also pull this actuator off, because I'm sure we're going to reuse it. I guess it sounds like it's a fairly new actuator and seems to be functioning fine. We'll double check all that when we pull it off. But so we'll pull that off while the turbo's still mounted, get it out of our way so we can put a new gasket and stuff on it for the new turbo. Alright, now we're going to get this. It's a coolant. It's 14mm. And it's got a washer on each side of that. We'll get that one off the actuator. We'll get this back one off the actuator. And then we'll go for these 4 Allen heads. Those are going to be 5mm Allen head. And you should be able to use like 1/4 inch ratchet on that. Sometimes they're snug, but you get too crazy, you'll break them. So we'll get those pulled off and get the actuator off of this thing. Give us a little more room. We'll get to these oil lines on the back and the hold down bolts. So we're plugging along. Alright, so the actuator is off. Not too horrible. You just want to make sure you don't lose these little washers that are on both of these lines. This gasket, we should have a new one in stock, so we'll reuse that. And then we'll just eyeball this. You always want to make sure these have full movement. Seems to be good. Doesn't really matter because we're changing it anyway. Actuator didn't have any codes in the computer, so it should be good to go back on the new turbo. So right now we'll get this line off. There's one more under it back here. See if you can see that. We'll get this one and this one off, and then we'll go for the hold down bolts on this clamp. I got the bolt out of this speed sensor back here, but it might take tilting this turbo a little bit when we take the hold downs off, so I can get in there and pop it out. It just snaps in with an O-ring. So that's how that goes, and we'll keep pulling this thing down. See this one down here. Once in a while this thing gets in your way, but we're able to bust this one loose. Alright, so those are off, turbo drains off. Only thing that's really holding us at this point is going to be the hold downs on the manifold and this clamp here. So it's a good idea to before you get started, I didn't do this today, but spray these clamps down with some PB Blaster or something, kind of get them working their way loose so that you don't break them coming apart. Sometimes the exhaust stuff kind of gets heated and corroded on there. So just a little fun tip that I didn't do myself. So I'm getting ahead of myself. It's not the only two things holding us. We do have this also. I used to use a 15/16 on here and kind of get, you have to get the right leverage because it's kind of a thin bolt and you'll pop off and bust your knuckles, but pull that thing off and then it's just those two holding us. We're really close. Alright, so I got this one off this back left side. In my experience, I try and do the back and bottom ones first, just because when you get to the last one, all the weight of the turbo's on that, so you want it to be where you can easily access it. So I'll get these back two out and then I'll keep pulling it apart. Alright, the back one's off of that stud right there, right about there. Now we just have these top two, so we'll pull them first. It looks like the studs are going to try and come with this one, which is fine. We'll replace them anyway, but we'll get those two off, and then we should be able to pull this turbo down, tilt it a little bit, and I'll take a screwdriver and pop this little speed sensor out. So. Looks like the stud's going to come with both of them. Alright, last one. Normally when the stud's not stuck, if you kind of just lift up on this turbo, you'll be able to spin that nut right off. But where the stud's stuck to it, I'm kind of just going to have to thread it out the whole way. Okay, got this last one out. I'll set it up here. Right now I'm kind of holding it on with my belly. But we'll just set this thing careful. This is going to kind of have to come undone like that. And there is a gasket inside of here. Just shake off those studs on the back. And then what I like to do, tip it up like this, and you can get in here with a screwdriver or your pocket knife. Just pop that thing out of there, just like that. It just seals in with an O-ring, and this one stayed in the turbo. You'll want to watch that if you're going to end up reusing this, because it will leak oil like a sieve if you don't have that O-ring in there. So now that that's off, we'll just manhandle this turbo over to the ground. And that's pretty much the off operation. That gasket that I was showing you, it has a little pin. There's a little hole, and it has to sit in that dowel pin to get it in there right. And the turbo also has a little spot for that dowel pin, so when you're going back together, something to watch for. But we'll do a little investigating. It does look oily down that pipe, so we're on to something. We'll update you with what we decide to do, but either way we'll be throwing a new turbo on this old girl. Alright, so we got the new turbo sitting here. This old one, all we got to do is pull these two fittings, oil fittings out. We'll swap them over to the new turbo, and we'll start going back together. This is an aftermarket turbo. We've had some super good luck with these. You'll save honestly a couple grand compared to a Cummins turbo. And the warranty's amazing, just as good as a Cummins warranty, and we do have them in stock. So we've done another video on this just showing kind of what these are if you want to go back and look at it. But super good luck with them. They seem to be nice turbos, people like them. and it's a really good money savings for you. So if you're interested, want to give us a call, we can get your engine number, get you the right one, and ship it out to you if you want to do it yourself too. So anyway, we'll get these fittings swapped over, and then we'll start going back together. Alright, these fittings swapped over to the new turbo. I'm going to go ahead and mount it up now. I'll get all these holes to line up, and I'll probably just start one nut and then start getting everything else to line up. Can't forget the gasket here. It has that hole for the dowel pin like I was talking about. I've just found that it's easier to shimmy that gasket in after the turbo's kind of mounted up a little bit. You do it all at once, you end up dropping everything. So we'll set the camera up here and start lifting it in. Alright, we're going to set this thing in. Kind of have to just fight some of this stuff that's in the way. We want to be careful not to break the drain pipe or anything like that. So I keep a nut handy here. Just like that. So kind of just have to muscle it onto all four, and then you just put one nut to hold it, and then we can start weaseling this gasket in, getting everything tight, going back together. But that'll get it hanging there for us. Probably gonna have to clock this a little bit, maybe move it up to match where the old one was, but small things. We're going back together now. Alright, so all of these manifold nut stud deals are all snugged up. I am going to take them a little tighter with a cheater wrench, so I know, but I'll do that here in just a second. Just so I know like this pipe's going to fit and stuff before I snug those down. I'm going to weasel that gasket in here and get that pin. You kind of see that pin right there. Just going to get that gasket in there and snug it up. Then I know everything's stationary, and the rest of the stuff I can start putting on. It'll be a lot easier when it's already going to be sitting where it should be going down the road. So we'll keep plugging away. So you just have to watch, make sure the little dowel goes in the hole, but it really shouldn't butt up easy by hand like that, unless it is. So you're probably in good shape at that point. Then we just get this clamp on there. Take a 7/16 and snug that up. So just for the haters, I run this gun on number 1 just to run it down because I'm lazy. But when I get it tight, I'm going to take a end wrench to it just so I know that I'm not going to break it. Get it super tight with an end wrench, but not so much with, you hit it hard with this, you just break the clamp. So right where it's super tight but not broken is how far you got to go with those. So now that that's on there and the gasket's in, I'm going to hit all these nuts again with a cheater wrench, get them completely tight, and then I'll move on to putting all this other stuff around the turbo. This one can kind of suck. You just have to weasel around all this stuff over here. You can only get little bites on it. You just don't want this thing leaking, so you want to get it tight, but I know from experience that when you put a 1/2 inch bar on here and a socket up through the bottom with extensions or whatever, you get going way too tight and you snap them off and then you're pulling it back off. So I found through a few of these jobs that the end wrenches are the way to go because they get tight enough, but you're not quite manly enough to break them. Got one more to go. Just like that. So she's mounted up, she's tight there, tight here. First thing I'm going to do on the back is put in this speed sensor. And what I didn't video is I did go in that old turbo and pull that O-ring out. It seems to be in great shape, so we're just going to pop it back in there, put the 8mm hold down on it while we don't have any of the lines on the back. Get that thing out of the way, and then we'll go for these other ones. So you end up just feeling back here because you can't see. Alright, so it's in there. You just push it in, just a little snap is what pushes past that O-ring, and then I'll put that bolt in. Bolt started. I took it off with an end wrench, You could probably get away with a 1/4 inch ratchet and a socket, as long as it fits. That's what I'm gonna do. And this, I mean, that sensor is just plastic, so just go snug with it. You can't really wrench on it. Okay, that's tight. Next thing we'll do is put these 2 lines on, this one and the one below it, and we will be getting pretty close to putting the actuator on. Just get this one. Once you get them to start, they usually thread pretty easy, and then you just snug it with the wrench. There we go. Get that snug. So everything's on the back. We'll have to tie this up in here so it doesn't get burned on the exhaust, this speed sensor. But what I'm going to do next is this drain. I'll put the gasket on there and probably start one bolt, and that's probably can be the most tricky part of this whole ordeal, is making sure you don't miss that gasket and getting both bolts started on the bottom here. So we'll be doing that next. So this drain's going to be hard to show on the video, but you're going to put this gasket on there. I've done some like gasket maker on here before, but it seems like I've had the best luck just putting it on dry. And so we're just going to put it on there, start a bolt through to hold it, get one started, and then we're going to have to fish the back one in there as well. It's going to be hard to video. I'll probably just get it done and then show you the aftermath, but that's kind of what we're after right here. So kind of show you what I got going here. I've got that on. I don't know if you can even see that. Got the bolt started. I'm just going to go ahead and snug them. They're both a little bit loose, but the gasket's through both of them. So I'll just take an end wrench, get those tight with a 10mm end wrench, and that'll hold good. So we'll go to that point, and then we'll probably start putting the actuator on. Alright, so what I've done is I zip tied this actuator plug like they had it before, just so we know it stays together. It's not the right fix, but it's going to work for now. So the next step with this putting this actuator on is we've actually got to calibrate and install it through Cummins Insight. So I'm going to go over to the other side. We'll hook up the computer and we'll go in there to calibrating the turbo actuator, and I'll kind of show you how we do that. And then once it's calibrated, we'll be able to come and actually install it. And I've got a new install kit here. We've got a gasket, new bolts, and some little lube stuff that they put on this sweeping arm, kind of help it from seizing up and let it work on the actuator there. So let's go get Insight loaded up and we'll show you how that works. Alright, so we've got Insight loaded up. We connected to the ECM, and then we just came to ECM diagnostic tests. And there's going to be one down here by the bottom that says VGT electronic actuator installation and calibration. So we'll double click that. We'll go here, and what we want to do is install actuator. And that just means basically we plugged it in. It'll say right here the VG2 actuator must be removed from the turbocharger before proceeding with the install. It is. It's just sitting over there plugged in, so we do OK. And we'll go with start. Tell it OK. And this should start installing, and it says passed. So the install passed. Now we'll just go around to the actuator and mount it up completely, and then we'll come back and do the calibration and make sure it'll sweep that arm, and then we'll be right uptown and about ready to put this thing on the road. So in the install kit they just have a little tube, just a tiny bit of this grease like stuff, and we just put it on these little teeth here. Just gives that actuator roller something to work with so it don't get seized up. Then we'll set our gasket on. Set this camera down so I can actually do it. So set this gasket on. And you want to make sure this arm's all the way over to set this on, and you kind of just have to let it move around till it finds the teeth. Get it close and kind of rock it back and forth. So we struggle a little bit getting that actuator on. We'll see if it'll calibrate.
Well, that's not turning.
So it says it passed. Now we'll just hold it the rest of the way down and keep going. So we just had 2 bolts in this actuator to calibrate it, but it did pass calibration, so we'll snug them down, put the other 2 bolts in, tie all these wires up, and we're just about there. Then we'll be able to put the coolant lines back on the actuator, fill this thing back up with coolant, our 2 hoses, and we'll be done. So this has all happened in a matter of, I don't know, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So moving along pretty quick on this one. Sometimes you struggle with bolts or whatever, and you end up 3 or 4 hours. This kind of fits into the 1/4 inch rule. Get them snug with your 1/4 inch. You're not going to break them, but you get really wrenching on these with anything more, you'll break one of these bolts off in the turbo, and then you got a big mess to clean up. So we'll just get these coolant lines back on now. We'll be able to pour the coolant back in. Washer on both sides of this. There. 14 millimeter. Snugged up. This big one down here on the bottom, I use a 15/16 once I start it by hand. snug. And then we just got this one on the back that usually turns into a little bit of a pain just because it's tough to get started, but I think I just might have started it with my hand, so yep. So get that threaded in. Alright, so I've gone and just zip tied up all these wires so they're nice and clean. Everything's buttoned up on this thing. All we gotta do is put this charge air pipe back on and then the clean air up there. We're gonna throw an air filler in this thing. It's just good practice if they're even kind of dirty at all with a new turbo, so you don't just send some dust through it right at first. But yeah, that's pretty much the turbo replacement. Hopefully it made sense for you. We'll get this thing put back together and back on the road. So we appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next one.